مرحبا شباب. اليوم راح نحكي عن المعرفة والنكرة والجملة definites, indefinites, and sentences. The goals of today's video is to help you identify sentences as opposed to phrases, to help you be able to construct sentences, especially al-jumla al-ismiya, and to be able to properly construct phrases like al-idafa and ism wa sifa. So let's think about sentences and phrases. A sentence is a complete thought, a set of words that gives a complete piece of information. It can stand by itself and still pretty much make sense. We know about jumla ismiya and we know about jumla fa'liya. We've learned about that already. Those are complete ideas. And in Arabic, because we have all this information hiding in our verbs, we can actually give an entire complete information with a single word. Biyadrus. He studies, right? He's a good student. We get that out of that sentence. Now, a phrase, on the other hand, is a set of words that doesn't complete the information. It kind of leaves us on the edge of our seats, right? The tall, dark, handsome man. That's a great beginning to some sort of terrible novel, but it doesn't tell us anything. We haven't really gotten much information other than there is a tall, dark, handsome man, but we don't know what about him. Is he going to shoot somebody? Is he going to seduce somebody? Is he going to disappear into the night without another word? It's lots of words, but there's just no information because it's not complete. In Arabic so far, we've learned about two kinds of phrases, and these are the main phrases we're going to encounter over and over again in Arabic. Al-idafa, for example, am Nisrin, and ism wa sifa, al-jaw al-halu, the nice weather. Neither of these tell us any more information. Am Nisrin. Okay, what about him? Is he awesome? Does he live in Syria? Is he also fa'lan wahid? Same thing with al-jaw al-halu. Is it coming? Do you remember al-jaw al-halu? We just don't know any more information than that. So the way that we mark the differences between phrases and sentences in Arabic is using the definiteness of words. So I'm going to be using these two terms, ma'rifa and nekira, a lot, because I don't want us to keep thinking about definite and indefinite. Using the English terms, I want us to know these Arabic terms because we're going to use them a lot and the book will use them a lot. So, ma'rifa means definite. Definite, as we know, refers to things, usually there's one of something or something that we're talking about that's important to what we're talking about, something that we all know what it is. The way to remember the word ma'rifa is to remember that it's a lot like the word ya'rif. Ya'rif is to know something, and something that is definite is kind of known, right? We all know about it. Now there's more than one way to be definite. The most common way and the easiest way is if it has alif lam, right? Alif lam is the same as English the. It makes something definite. Pronouns, including demonstratives, are automatically definite because they're referring to one thing in the world and we should know what that one thing is. And then an idafa, the whole idafa is definite, even the parts without the alif lam, right? The last part of the idafa is definite and it makes the rest of it definite, which causes us to end up in sort of a weird recursive cycle where parts are indefinite but then the whole is definite. We'll worry about that more as we move along. Remember too that anything with a possessive pronoun is definite because it's a kind of idafa, right? Ismi really means the name of me, and that's a kind of idafa. The nekira means indefinite, and basically it's anything that doesn't have one of the above properties, right? There's no alif lam, it's not an idafa, it's just a word without any extra stuff on it. So there are two kinds of phrases that we're becoming familiar with bil Arabi. The first is al-idafa, and al-idafa is used to express possession. It's a phrase though. It doesn't say this is somebody's thing, it's somebody's blank, right? Somebody's car. Joe's car. Claire's horse, right? We don't know anything more about this than just that this thing is possessed by this person. We've learned the rule that only the last word can be explicitly ma'rifa, but the whole phrase itself is basically ma'rifa. For example, Beit al-Ustaz. This is a phrase, we don't know anything more about this bait. Is it bait kabir? Is bait al-ustaz kabir? Bait al-ustaz saghir? Al-ustaz ma'ando masari? Right? We don't know. It's just a phrase. Another kind of phrase that we haven't learned very much about is ism wa sifa. This kind of phrase is just describing things, so telling us more about something. Usually it's one noun and as many adjectives as you want. The rule is that the adjectives have to match the noun in three important things. They have to match in definiteness, which we're going to focus on today, in gender, and in number. So if we say al-bint al-wahida, that matches in definiteness. They're both ma'rifa. Al-bint al-wahida, they match in gender, because bint is mu'annith, feminine, and wahida has a tamrabuda on it. And number, we're talking about one bint, and al-wahida is singular. We could also have an ism wa sifa that's just nakira, wajib sab, right? We could say andi wajib sab, right? Homework, hard, right? Hard homework. Remember, our adjectives always come after the noun bil arabi. Here it matches in definiteness, they're both nakira. Gender, they're both mudhakkar, masculine. And number, we're talking about one wajib, and sab is also in the singular. Finally, we could say tulab mumtazin. Here it matches in definiteness. Tulab and mumtazin are nakira, there's no alif lam, there's nothing else. Gender, not as important in the plural for us right now. And number, tulab is plural, mumtazin is plural. Now, those things were phrases. They didn't tell us any actual information. Al-jumla ismiya is one of our two kinds of jumlas by which we express information. Remember, in English we don't have al-jumla al-ismiya. Every single sentence that we say has is, or a real verb. In Arabic, we don't need the word is in the present tense. So how exactly do we tell what is what, right? What is being equated to what in a jumla ismiya? And this is really the most important question. Where is the hidden, not spoken is in a jumla ismiya? Well, luckily, Arabic makes this a little bit easier in general by marking the two parts of the sentence with different amounts of definiteness. So, a sentence almost always starts with a definite. This means that al-mubtada is almost always ma'rifa. The new information, because the new information isn't known to us, right, therefore it's not definite in the sense of definite things are known, is almost always indefinite. Yani, al-khabar nakira. If we knew this thing already, it probably wouldn't be very interesting new information. So that's why the khabar is usually nakira. So al-mubtada, which we're going to be marking here in blue with everything else in this presentation that's ma'rifa will be marked in blue, and al-khabar is green because it's nakira, which we're marking everything in this presentation that's nakira in green. That difference between the two tells us where the hidden is lives. Al-mubtada will end when you end the ma'rifa section. You start a nakira section, that's where the is going to live. Or hide, really, right? Because we don't actually say that is bil arabi, like we would bil inglesi. So we can summarize this all in this handy-dandy chart. And it helps us sort of create a field guide to things that we're going to see when we read and speak and talk and listen bil arabi. So, in the chart, you have kalima wahid or kalima itnain. Generally, if you have ma'rifa followed by nakira, you have a jumla ismiya. If you have a nakira followed by a ma'rifa, right, we learned this already, you have an idafa, right? Everything is nakira until you get to the very end, which is ma'rifa. If they match, so you have ma'rifa and ma'rifa, or nakira and nakira, then you have an ism and sifa. Hold in mind that anything that is in that red box, those are phrases. They don't tell you, they do not complete the sentence. Only ma'rifa followed by nakira here is going to give us a jumla ismiya, full sentence. Hold in mind that I'm simplifying things a little bit, and if you want a little more information, as long as it doesn't make your head explode, listen to the For Nerds Only section later on. So, if we were to go out in the field and try to find some sentences and distinguish their parts, imagine we have our Arabic binoculars on, and we're out there and we're going to find some phrases, and we need to identify them. So let's look at this one. Al-Ustadh Za'lan. Alright, so Al-Ustadh, is this ma'rifa or nakira? Well, we have an alif lam, so it's ma'rifa, nice and blue. Za'lan has no alif lam, it's not nun idafa, so it must be nakira. Well, we have a ma'rifa followed by a nakira, that's a jumla ismiya. The professor is upset. Jumla ismiya. Another phrase. We've just learned this new phrase as part of our chapter khamsa, fasl khamsa, darajat al-harara, right? When you hear me say it out loud, it makes it a little bit easier to know what it is. But let's break it down. The first word has no alif lam on it. Alright? So it must be nakira. The second word does have an alif lam, so it must be ma'rifa, which makes this what? Think to yourself. Yep, it's an idafa, right? The first word is nakira, the last word is ma'rifa. Here's a good one from Al-Fasl Wahid, inexplicably enough. Al-Umam al-Muttahida, the United Nations. So the first word is what? Well, there's an alif lam, so it must be ma'rifa. The second word has an alif lam as well, which is also ma'rifa, which makes this a what? Yep, that's right. An ism wa sifa. The two words match in their ma'rifa, in their definiteness. Alright? Al-Umam al-Muttahida, the United Nations. Just like in English, united is an adjective describing nations. What about the word aila kabira? The phrase aila kabira, or the words aila kabira. We don't know what it is just yet because we have to analyze it. Well, the first word is ma'rifa or nakira, no alif lam, so it must be nakira. Kabira, we have nakira as well. So they both match each other, which means they are, that's right, ism wa sifa. So let's look at a little more complicated one. Ibn Ammi Suri. Well, this is a little bit complicated, so let's break it down. Ibn is ma'rifa or nakira. Well, there's no alif lam on it, so we'll go with nakira right now. Ammi is an idafa, right? My uncle, which means that it's ma'rifa. Well, in that case, what's the relationship between ibn and ammi? Well, ibn seems to be part of a bigger idafa. Ibn ammi, right? So the whole thing is ma'rifa because it's son of my am. So we have to treat that whole unit as ma'rifa now that we figured out what it is. Well, what about suri? Is it ma'rifa or nakira? There's no alif lam. That's easy. It's nakira. We have a ma'rifa in the beginning and a nakira in the end, which means this is a what? Yep, jumla ismiya. So the phrase means my son, the son of my uncle is Syrian, right? There's an is hiding between those two parts. And we can figure that out just by playing around with the ma'rifa and nakira. So when we write our own sentences, we need to start thinking about this stuff so that we can make sure that our sentences are good sentences. The main rule is that sentences should start with a ma'rifa, something that's definite. This is usually because you are talking more than one sentence at a time and telling people about more information about things that they're already familiar with. So normally you start a sentence with a ma'rifa. Now, of course, that means the sentence should begin with alif lam, or a word with a pronoun suffix, or a word in an idafa, right? Our last sentence was ibn ammi. That's an idafa, right? It started with a ma'rifa. What happens a lot of times in the writing that I see in class is that people will start saying something like "Akh yadrus fi jamiat Boston." Well, the question here is, who's akh, right? Is it your brother? Is it some brother you were talking about 4 sentences ago and I don't know anymore? Which brother are we talking about? It just doesn't make sense because I can't figure out who you're giving me information about if I don't know who this person is or have something telling me that, oh, this is something you should know already. For example, we could fix this if we're talking about our ach by saying achi yedrus fi Jamiat Boston, right? My brother studies fi Jamiat Boston. Alternately, if we're talking within that context, we can use the to tell us this is a brother you should know about. So صاحبي عنده عائلة صغيرة. عنده أخ واحد وأخت واحدة. الأخ يدرس في جامعة بوسطن. Here we have Aleph Lam tells us, oh, this is the ach we were just mentioning in the previous sentence. Okay? So you can use either of these things, but a sentence should normally start with a ma'rifa. 99% of the time, sentences start with a ma'rifa. If they don't start with a ma'rifa, crazy things happen, which we're going to learn about soon. Of course, mama and baba are exceptions to this. We normally only have one mama and one baba. Times are changing, but I don't think that's going to change the structure too much. So you don't need an Aleph Lam because it's just assumed when you say mama, you mean my mom or the mom that we're talking about. It's just so implied that you don't really need those. So those are exceptions to this. But words like ach, ucht, there can be many achs and uchs. So you need to specify more thoroughly who exactly you're talking about. So imagine we went out and we had to read a passage in Arabic or a web page in Arabic or something like that. So let's see how we can apply this in the real world. The neat trick of all of this is that even if you don't know all of the words, you can sometimes figure out the structure of a sentence, even if you don't know all of the words in that sentence, because you can look at the ma'rifa and nekira and see how the structure works. In fact, I was once in a class where we were not allowed to look in a dictionary until we had figured out the structure of the sentence. Because you can tell the structure of the sentence from the grammar, even if you don't know the meanings of the words involved. So here's the nice passage. I don't know why I was looking up Samoa Lemrikia on Wikipedia, but for some reason I was. Let's break it down a little bit. All right, so this is the first line of a Wikipedia article. There are no verbs in this line, so we have a jumla ismiya. Actually, it starts with an ism, so it's a jumla ismiya, but there's also no verbs in it, so it's a very pure jumla ismiya. So the first word is Samoa. Well, Samoa is a proper name, which means it's definite, right? Just like Nisreen or Alex or Ahmed, right? All of those are definite. So Samoa is ma'rifa, right? Shade it blue because that's our ma'rifa color. Al-Amrikiya has an Aleph Lam, and we're going to shade it blue as well. So we have two ma'rifas in a row, which gives us a what? It gives us an ism wa sifa, right? So we're getting pretty used to that, and this is an ism wa sifa that's ma'rifa, so I'm going to mark it in blue. The next word, we don't know how to pronounce it. We don't know how to say it. We've never seen this word before. We could maybe make a weird guess if we really knew our random Arabic trivia, but we're not going to know what this word means. But we do know this. There's no Aleph Lam on it. So we know that it's nekira. The next word is also nekira, right? No Aleph Lam on it. What do we call that? Well, we have two nekira things in a row. They match, which means they're an ism wa sifa. Let's look at the last bit. The last bit's not that important. We're not going to worry about it too much. We have this word lil wilayat. Well, this l thing, there's two lambs, right? And we're going to learn more about this, but this is actually a preposition. It means sort of like to or towards. And it usually eats up the aleph of an Aleph Lam. But if we know that, and we're going to learn more about this soon, this means that that word is ma'rifa. And it's after a preposition, so we don't have to worry about this stuff too much. A lot of stuff gets added extra to sentences, right? If you say, Ana talib fi Jamiat Rhode Island, fi Jamiat Rhode Island, it's kind of extra information. It tells you about the rest of the sentence, but it's kind of just an extra part of the khabar of that sentence. So lil walayat, and then al muttahida here is also ma'rifa. So we have another ism wa sifa. There's a little preposition in front of it, so we won't worry about that too much. Look at the first half of the sentence. We have a ma'rifa chunk followed by a nekira chunk, which is what? That's a jumla ismiya. So we can figure out where the is should be put. We should put it right here, between the ma'rifa and the nekira. So American Samoa is whatever the heck the rest of the sentence means, right? That's where the is goes. So you can see how this is useful when understanding and breaking apart sentences we've never read before. The book in this section also talks about the words hadha and hadhihi in Fusha, and hada and hadi bil amiyya. These words are what we call in English grammar demonstratives, because they demonstrate, they point something out. Alright, so we've seen a lot of videos with Nisreen standing there with a picture being like, hada ammi mahir, right? She's pointing at it, pointing a sign out. You could point at something in the classroom. They're like a pronoun. They count as definite automatically, because it's something that we're pointing at. We all know it, alright? So, for example, these can be used in sentences. And at the beginning of the sentence, right, because they're ma'rifa, they can be used at the beginning of the sentence. Then the khabar of the sentence is usually nekira. So, say you're looking at this DVD and you're like, well, what is this DVD? Is it music? Is it a video game? What is it? Well, someone could say, hada film, right? They're pointing to the DVD, hada film. This is a film, right? So it's a movie, it's not a video game, unfortunately. Alright. It could also be a phrase, right? We can have phrases where we're like, this man goes to the store every day, right? We need to have a way to make a phrase, okay? This is the one confusing thing. Normally our adjectives, things describing our nouns, go after them. Well, this is an exception. The demonstratives go before our nouns. The noun, however, must be ma'rifa, and this makes it into a phrase. So if you say, hada el film, this film, you've just said a phrase. We don't know anything more about it, right? This could be, hada el film ma behebbo, right? We could be getting more information about it. So that's just an ism and a sifa. They're both ma'rifa, they match, so it's just a phrase. If we want to have a jumla, what we're going to need to do is add some information to it, right? Hada el film mumtaz, it's my favorite film. Hada el film mumtaz, whatever. We have that split from ma'rifa, and suddenly we get a nekira. We have a nice jumla now. So let's do a little bit of our observation of these kinds of phrases. Hada al ustaz, right? Well, the first part is ma'rifa just by virtue of what kind of word it is. Well, ustaz has an alif lam on it, so it's also ma'rifa. So what do we have? Ism wa sifa. We have a phrase. This isn't exactly the grammatical term that they'd use in Arabic, but it's close enough. It's a kind of phrase. Now, we have hada ustaz. The first word, again, is ma'rifa. The second word has no alif lam on it anymore, so it's nekira. If we have ma'rifa and nekira, that's right, it's a jumla ismiya. This is a professor. Now, this can get a little more confusing because it builds onto each other, right? So if we say, hada al ustaz za'lan, we have hada is ma'rifa, al ustaz is ma'rifa, so we have a whole phrase, right? And then za'lan has nothing on it, it's nekira, so what we have is jumla ismiya. This professor is za'lan, probably because his tulab ma bi'amlu al-wajib. So let's summarize all this. The word for definite is ma'rifa. Indefinite is nekira. Arabic uses the difference between ma'rifa and nekira to mark what things are sentences and what things are phrases. If the two words in a row match in definiteness, they're probably a noun and an adjective or demonstrative and the thing that it's describing, right? If there's a mismatch between the two, you either have a jumla or an idafa. We've learned that the rule for jumla is that normally we have ma'rifa followed by nekira, and we know that for an idafa, the first words are going to be nekira, and finally you'll get ma'rifa. And then the reason this is all very important is because this gives us a clue as to where the is would go in a sentence using those definite clues, definiteness clues, even if we don't know what it means. Shukran. You can also continue on and watch this section that I call for nerds only. If you think you're really confused already by the first half of the video, I don't necessarily recommend this. But if you're curious about some more complexities and wrinkles, feel free to keep watching. You can always come back and watch this again later once you think you understand the material better. So, we professors tell you guys little white lies. That is, we tell you things to simplify your life that aren't really true. We justify this by the fact that if we were to tell you everything all at once, your heads would explode and you would all quit the class. So, one thing that I've been saying throughout the video is that in al-jumla ismiya, the khabar is normally nakira. For example, we say, Alex Ustav. Alex is a professor. Well, what happens if we want to say Alex is the professor, right? If someone comes into the class and I'm just so darn youthful that nobody knows who's the professor and who's the student, they might ask, Mina Ustav, right? We have to say that Alex is the professor of this class, for example, right? Well, we're going to have to say it as ma'rifa because he's the professor. There's only one, right? It's something we know about. So here we're going to have to say Alex el-Ustav. Well, that's really confusing because it kind of looks, the two match, they're both ma'rifa. We don't have a distinction between the two in the sentence, right? We could also say Alex, Ustav, Safna, right? We have the same problem. Well, this is why Arabic isn't the easiest language in the world. There's no clear thing distinguishing which part of the sentence is distinguished from the other. So you just have to understand all the words and then figure out where you think the is should go. Another problem with this is that sometimes we might end up with something being ambiguous. So demonstratives are always definite. But, as I just said, the khabar of a jumla ismiya could potentially be definite as well. So the phrase hada al-ustad could mean two things. Based on what we saw previously, we would assume it means this professor. But what if someone comes into the room and asks you, well, which one of these people is the professor, right? You have to point out the professor and you say hada al-ustad, right? The professor, not a professor. There could be a room full of professors getting a lecture from another professor, right? So you have to point out who's the professor that's being asked about, hada al-ustad. So this is ambiguous, which means that it has more than one possible interpretation. Unfortunately, it just is ambiguous. There's no way to know exactly what it means except from context and from understanding what's going on. There is a solution to this used in Arabic quite often, and it is to put a huwa or hiya, a pronoun usually, in between the two parts of the sentence. And in Arabic this is called damir fasil, a pronoun that just separates parts of the sentence. Hold in mind, this does not mean is. This is not a substitute for the word is. There is no word is. It's just a signpost. And people don't always use this, so you can't rely on it existing. Especially in ambiguous sentences, though, not always, they will add it in to make life a little bit easier. Note that the gender of the pronoun usually matches the mubtada. So, if we say hada al-ustad, it's totally ambiguous. But if we add a huwa in the middle, suddenly it's not ambiguous. We know it's a jumla ismiya, right? Hada huwa al-ustad. It marks that this is a jumla ismiya and not a phrase by breaking up the phrase, and tells us this should be interpreted as a complete thought. There should be a period at the end. Hada huwa al-ustad. Hada al-ustad is just ambiguous. We're never going to know except from context, possibly periods and punctuation, but you can't really rely on that in Arabic. Notice that this is done a lot, and I actually changed the example from Wikipedia to make things a little simpler in the previous discussion. But notice in the red circle that that's how they did this in Wikipedia in order to make the sentence a little bit clearer. Samoa al-Amrikiya hiya jazr tabi'a lil-wilayat al-Muttahida. Notice that the hiya shows up exactly where we said there would be an is if we were saying this in English. Shukran.